All right, ladies and gentlemen, real quick, while I have a break a little bit, I'm going to watch a video that a lady that we watched last night. I posted her video in my chat. I will also post it in the description, Miss Chasing. So we're going to watch another video that she came up with, and I want to ask some questions myself about this. Uh, we didn't think Ron Logan was bridge guy. He just didn't match the look or the size. So we didn't on this channel. We always said we don't know if he was involved or not, but he's not bridge guy. Excuse me, I'm eating some baked beans. He might have been on that recording. We're not sure because we haven't heard all the recording. So let's watch a little bit of this lady's video. A good creator, good channel. It's called Chasing. And I have questions too, you know. We all do. So let's check it out real quick.
Mystery, the embodiment of evil that would forever scar this town. He was a killer preserved in time, a reminder of the final moments of Abby and Libby's lives. Names like Brad Holder, whose dark online presence and unsettling ties to Odinist rituals raise serious questions. Richard Allen, a man who walked the trails that day and would later resurface as a key figure. Ron Logan, whose property became the scene of unimaginable speculation. Each suspect, a thread in a tangled web, carried with them secrets and suspicions that would shape the course of the investigation. Before we dissect these suspects, we need to revisit one of the most pivotal moments in the case, the press conference held on February 22nd, 2017. By this time, tips were flooding in. Some individuals had already been questioned, and others had their social media activity reviewed. But the press conference marked a turning point as investigators unveiled a clue that would captivate and haunt people. The short audio clip, recorded on Libby's phone. The words that were spoken down the hill.
Before we start this episode, here's a quick preview of what's coming. Take an animated trip around the world and see what it's like for teens living.
This moment became both a plea for assistance and an unforgettable echo of what had transpired that day on the bridge. It cemented the image of the bridge guy into our collective consciousness, a stark reminder of the danger that lurked so close to home. Let's take a moment to listen to what was shared with the world on February 22nd, 2017.
Profession. Please understand we're human beings just like you. I'd stand anywhere in the nation with people standing behind me. And I would suggest to you that every time something like this happens, a little piece of us dies as well. But I also want you to understand how committed we are as a collective one, and we will continue. This has been briefed all the way up to the director of the FBI, Director Comey, and Greg Mass is going to talk a little bit about that. I've had an opportunity to speak to my boss, Governor Eric Holcomb, a couple different times about this situation. And every time I do, I see this look that comes over his face, just like yours and his communities. And that's the unfortunate experience of experiencing evil.
All right. My question was with Ron Logan. I don't think Ron was stupid enough to lose everything he got and leave the girls on his own property. Why? Well, because as soon as they found the girls, that would have gave him away. Why? Because it was on his property. Of course they're going to look for Ron. Very stupid, right? Very stupid. Now, there's new evidence coming out about Ron Logan, whether it's true or not, that he did know Keegan Kline, and they did share photos or was into the pedo stuff. But you have to go back to reality. Was this man that stupid to do this murder by himself, 70 some years old, and then leave the bodies there? Or not even leave them there, take them, hide them somewhere, and bring them back and plant them on his own property? Now, either that's got to be the most stupidest criminal ever in the world, or he didn't do the murders. And if he did, I'm sure he would have said, "You get them bodies off of my land. Are you nuts? They're going to come directly to me as soon as they find them on my property." And that was something people didn't overlook. Well, he was on their property. You think he was that dumb to leave them right there on his property? No, I'm not saying he didn't. But if you put two and two together, he'd have to be the most stupidest person ever in the world, right? Or what was his intentions? Was he hiding the bodies and then going to do other stuff later on? We're not sure, but here, I can say this much. In order to do what he did and have enough time, there's no way that old man carried both of them women or young girls to that area or anywhere. He didn't have enough time before people started looking. He had an hour, right? Now they're saying, well, he hit him in the shack, right? Yeah, you're telling me this 70-some-year-old man carried Abby and Libby, both of them, at the same time and put them in the shack or whatever and hit them? I don't think so. Now, I'm not saying Mr. Ron Logan didn't have anything to do with it. I'm saying he's not Bridge Guy. And other than that, we have nothing to go by that it was Ron Logan, but someone that was abused by him. And I understand she was abused, or ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it was. And she was abused by him. And she has her opinions on it, right? There's no law against that. But as far as Bridge Guy being Ron Logan, no. And if it is Ron Logan, then there's our proof that someone tampered with the Bridge Guy video and photos and photo ops, because there ain't no way that Bridge Guy is Ron Logan, right? Not unless somebody tampered with the footage. Now let's continue to watch the video. Hello, RC99.
We're not stopping. The poster in front of you. Someone knows who this individual is. Someone knows who this individual is. Is it a family member? Is it a neighbor? Is it an acquaintance? Is it an associate? Or maybe that one guy that lives over at that one place that just kind of not right. Maybe it's his jeans. Maybe it's his jacket or his sweatshirt. Maybe it's his shirt tail. Maybe it's his posture. Maybe it's the right hand in his pocket. You see, even with technology, we need human intelligence. In other words, we need you. I'm not suggesting that everything that we can do with science has been done, because we are just getting started. Abby and Libby deserve us. They deserve every single one of us, and not just the people standing up here on the stage that have given so much of their lives to not just this, but to this profession, but each and every one of you. Each and every person listening, watching, or seeing this in some form, we need you. Libby and Abby need you. Please do not rationalize tips away. Rationalize what you think that might not be important away by thinking he would never do that to another human being. Or think what I know doesn't matter. Let folks like the people that are standing behind me with such incredible passion and commitment and dedication to this profession make that determination. Tips are anonymous. Some might not want to talk about it because they don't want to get involved, because they know the individual. Again, he may be a family member, probably has family. No one will ever know. No one will ever know. There's not an agency on the planet better than helping us facilitate this than the FBI. And they're as entrenched in this as anybody. No one will know. As poor as this picture is, somebody knows. And if you're watching, we'll find you.
All right. So, what do we got? Well, we got a lot of people that were players in the game. Whether they like to admit it or not, you can get up here on this YouTube and you can put on a face and you could put, I didn't have, this has nothing to do. You were suspects. If you were looking like Bridge Guy, you were a suspect. If you were around people that were questioned or being investigated, you became a suspect. Whether your channel was $1 million channel, whether your channel was being watched by YouTube to protect you folks because you're a big bringer inner of money or whatever, it don't matter, because your laws are not going to protect you folks. What a tangled web they wove. And they can't understand that. No, they might not have been there. They might not have done nothing, had nothing to do with it. But being that these people were around certain individuals that were suspects, were being watched, and then we watched you start attacking channels and watched you folks put out fake videos and try to lead people away from the truth, that you thought it was that. I have a feeling this is deeper than what they thought. Now let's continue with this video. And yeah, everybody has their right opinion, but when you start backing junkies and pedos, and that should have never ever been covering anything to do with children or even calling themselves an investigator, was a smack in the face to our beloved police department and government. I don't know how these dudes or these women ended up being top dogs in the YouTube community. I have no idea. No idea. And that's why it is magical. It is spiritual. It's a bunch of evil, is what I'm saying. Let's continue.
Now let's explore the individuals who became entangled in this dark story. At first glance, Ron Logan might have seemed like an unlikely suspect. An elderly man living alone on a sprawling property near the Monon High Bridge. But proximity alone made him an early target. The bodies of Abby and Libby were found on his land, a fact that would haunt him for the rest of his life. For years, Logan was a figure of suspicion. The evidence against him, while circumstantial, was compelling enough to warrant a search of his property, and later led to chilling revelations about a supposed confession. We'll get to that. The Monon High Bridge Trail, a picturesque area that turned into a place of horror, ran near Logan's property. His proximity to where the bodies of Abby and Libby were found immediately drew attention. But it wasn't just the geography that raised eyebrows, it was his behavior. On the day of the murders, Logan reportedly asked a family member to lie for him, providing an alibi for the afternoon of the 13th. He claimed he had been out running errands far from the trails when the killings occurred. but phone data would contradict this. Logan is a 77-year-old male. Physical build is consistent with a male suspect videoed by LG, which is Libby German, on the Monenhigh Bridge Trail. Logan owns farmland and cares for large animals. He appears to be in good physical condition. He has been interviewed several times. His voice is not inconsistent with the person in the video. It was also discovered that the blank of one of the victims was missing from the crime scene, while the rest of their clothing was recovered. It also appeared that the girls' bodies were moved and staged. Based on my training and experience, it is common for perpetrators of this type to take a souvenir, in some fashion to memorialize the crime scene by electronic or digital methods so that they can view them again later. Libby and Abby had no visible signs of a struggle or fight. During the processing of the crime scene, investigators located unknown fire.
Another point I want to make up is the two girls knew Ron Logan. And Ron Logan said he had an altercation with him once before on the property and also at Walmart or something like that. Now, I could be wrong, but that's a video that was put out a long time ago that he admitted he knew the two girls. They had an altercation or something like that. Now, that don't mean he's the killer, right? You would have think the girls would have said on the recording, right? Because we're hearing about a creepy guy. There was some creepy guy. Well, Ron Logan don't look too creepy. He looks like a average Joe grandpa, right? He don't look too creepy. I mean, maybe his eyes. But why didn't the girl say that's the guy from Walmart that we had an altercation with, or that's Ron Logan, right? It's freaky, and we're going through the whole thing over again because here's the question: if it was just him and the two girls, you would think he would have said girls, not guys. You know, you got to use your common sense. Do I think he's stupid enough to do all this and then left them on his property? What kind of madman would do that? That's just asking for trouble. That's just asking to get your whole life taken away from you, right? Now, once again, I'm not saying he didn't have anything to do with it. He might have been there. He might be one of the dudes on the recording that we're not listening to. For all we know, I don't know. I don't think he's capable of taking them two girls from that spot and then hiding the bodies and then carrying them back again. I mean, not unless he had a horse, not unless he had a four-wheeler or something. But even then, it was the most stupidest thing to even leave the bodies anywhere near his house if he was the killer. Does that make sense to anybody? If so, comment on the video and comment in the chat. If it does make sense, then voice your opinion.
Fibers and unidentified hairs, which may later be used for comparison. Logan owns numerous weapons, including handguns and knives, that were observed by law enforcement during the execution of a search warrant that took place on March 6th. Logan's home was searched as a result of a probation violation. The search was limited to the discovery of firearms and included only his main residence. On February 14th, at approximately 9:20 a.m., Logan would contact his cousin, Blank. Logan asked him to tell the police that he came to Logan's home between 2 and 2:30 p.m. on the 13th to pick Logan up. Logan further told him to say that he drove Logan to an aquarium store in Lafayette. Logan told Blank to say that they returned home to Logan's home between 5 and 5:30. On February 14th, while requesting consent to search Logan's property, law enforcement advised Logan that law enforcement would not search his home unless evidence led them to Logan's house. In that meeting, Logan told law enforcement he did not think evidence would lead them, but said to that, "I don't know." A receipt from Aquarium World in Lafayette dated February 13th.
All right, let's touch base on this. Why would he say he don't know? That no evidence would be led? Well, of course they were going to look at him right away because the bodies were discovered on his property. Now, whether there was any evidence inside that house or whatever, who knows? There's rumors going around that he knew some of these guys. Now, whether that's true or not, maybe. There's a couple guys that are already in prison, locked up. Kurtz and a couple other guys that said they knew him, his property and stuff like that. They said there was that bridge, underneath that bridge in that area was known for partying and meth. They would go out there and cook their meth, their little shake and bake meth labs or whatever. Now that very well may be possible. And it very well may be that Ron Logan knew these people that did this. But I think Ron Logan would have had enough brains if he was, like I said, involved in this anyhow, anyway, whether he knew one of these guys or not. And that in just knowing these guys don't make him the murderer. Makes him a suspect. It makes him maybe a part of a crime, which these guys, some of these guys, I think, took a cop plea, and they pled to lesser charges, conspiracy to, yada yada yada, pedophile stuff, whatever. But the bottom line is, they never found any evidence at Ron Logan's. They found a lot of guns, knives, yada yada yada. But there was other people that were interviewed at that time that said, yeah, he had a bunch of guns and knives and he knew the property. He went over there. A couple of them said they'd help with the horses. They knew the property. My question is are these people so crazy down there that they would do something like that and then leave the body on their own property, knowing as soon as they found them bodies, he was going to be getting a knock on the door by the authorities. Now let's touch base on the other thing. At that time, Ron Logan was not allowed to drive, whether it be drunk driving or whatever his situation was. He was suspended. They came to figure out at that time that he lied because he broke his probation. He was driving when he wasn't supposed to be driving. And that's what they said. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. None of us know because we're not looking at the proof that they had. We don't know. We're going by what we can see, what was released, documentation, whatever, his suspension, yada, 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 right? Let's continue.
With a checkout time of 5:21 p.m. was found in Logan's home on March 6th during the probation violation search. Logan resides 22 miles from the store. It would take approximately 30 minutes to get to the store from his home. On March 6th, during an interview, Logan said he was picked up by blank around 3 p.m., taken straight to the aquarium store in Lafayette. In the March 6th interview, Logan said after he was done, he was driven straight home. These statements were found to be factually false and intentionally designed to deceive LE. If there was a checkout time of 5:21, he could not have returned home by 5:30. On March 17th, Blank was interviewed by law enforcement. Blank told law enforcement he was with Logan on Monday the 13th and that he drove Logan to the aquarium store in Lafayette. On March 9th, Blank was interviewed by another law enforcement officer regarding the trip to the aquarium. Blank would tell law enforcement he had lied when
This
he
is
was
how they
interviewed
found out
on the
Ron Logan
7th
was
at
driving,
Logan's request.
because
Blank
they went back
explained that Logan
and
had
looked at the
never
footage
asked him
of
to
the
lie for him in the
places
past.
that he was,
Blank
that
knows
he
Logan
said he
has driven
was,
his vehicle while on
when there was no
probation
one with him.
and is prohibited from
The
doing
reason he
so.
was lying because
Blank
he
also
knew he
said
wasn't supposed
Logan
to
did
drive.
not ask him to lie for him when Logan drove to the transfer station earlier in the day. On March 12th, Blank explained that in an interview to law enforcement, Logan called him the morning of February 14th and asked him to provide the alibi for the drive to the aquarium. This phone call was made prior to the discovery of Libby and Abby. Based on investigators' experience, it is reasonable to believe that the creation of an alibi prior to the discovery of a crime creates culpability or knowledge of the crime.
Now, this little lady is right on the button, right on the hot nail, right? We didn't know this in the beginning of the case. None of this was released until Ron Logan passed away, right? Nobody knew that he called before the murders, right before the girls were found, right? Nobody knew that. So, what do you think? What do you got? What do you do? You know? Well, that's why they went back and they needed evidence, right? They caught him in a lie. They went back and looked at the footage. He was driving when he wasn't supposed to be, and that's what we all thought. Excuse me, is that Mr. Logan lied because it would have broke his probation and he wasn't supposed to be driving. He knew that if he got caught, he'd be going back to jail. And that's exactly what happened. He did go to jail for breaking his probation. Now, whether Mr. Logan had anything to do with the crime, whether a coincidence or it was just a coincidence that the girls were dead, he knew it. It was his property, people looking all over the place. And he called someone and needed an alibi or whatever because they knew they were going to check into him. Why? Because the bodies were found on his property. It makes sense to me, right? He knew when the girls were discovered, they were discovered on his property. Uh, and I have a lot of questions for Mr. Logan. Why weren't you out there looking your property? Right? If you were so worried about everything, why weren't you looking and searching that whole night your whole property? I would have been. I would have been like, I ain't going down for this shit. Right? We're gonna find them bodies one way or another. I don't know how far I would have went. Yeah, you pick them uh, people up and you move them off of my property. Well, some of these old timers are like that, right? This shit ain't gonna happen on my property. And Ron Logan had a problem out there. Now, whether they set up the chemtrail photos to film their sick stuff, or to watch their meth labs, or to see or whatever, or if Ron Logan was sick and tired of these punks being on their property, and he set up cameras to watch and see who was on his property. Whatever it may be, the proof is what evidence did they find in Ron Logan's house or on Ron Logan or any DNA of Ron Logan's is my question. Let's continue.
Blank said he thought the photograph of the male that was released by the media of the man on the bridge looked like Logan. Law enforcement learned that Logan had driven on the 13th to the transfer station to drop off trash. Video from the transfer station shows him driving his white Ford pickup between 11:27 and 11:32. The video from the transfer station appears to be off by 26 minutes, putting him at the transfer station between 11:53 and 11:58. Logan did not ask his cousin to provide an alibi for his drive to the transfer station on the 13th. He only asked him to provide an alibi for a trip that would have occurred at the time of the apparent abduction of Libby and Abby. On March 8th, Blank was interviewed by law enforcement. Blank met Logan 7 or 8 years ago and was in a personal relationship with him for a couple of months and would stay in his home on the weekends. She left Logan after he became physically abusive. During her interview, she explained that Logan continued to stalk and harass her after the breakup. During the relationship, Logan had dragged her out of the car by her hair. She still fears Logan. Blank has not had contact with him in approximately 2 years. She told
All right. So, what do we got? Hold on a minute. All right. So, what do we got here? Well, now we got which we knew. We all seen the videos of his ex-girlfriend claiming that he was very violent, right? But this was only after Ron Logan passed away. Why didn't they let us know this in the beginning of the case? Which was very, very fishy, right? Now, here's another thing. Oh, it's a proven fact that a lot of people wanted some of Ron Logan's land, developers, and there was a lot of talk that people were trying to get his land. Now, how do you get rid of somebody that you want their property? Well, one might be plant dead bodies on it, and then he gets blamed, and then yada, 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 and you're on your way to, uh, someone going to prison, and they ain't never going to get their land. But these people are so dumb they don't understand. Uh, Ron Logan probably had a will, and the people in that will would have got the property. You just can't walk up on a property and say, we own it now and we're going to sell it, right? I mean, it does happen all the time. It's called corruption. And that's why a lot of people just weren't buying the story. But we didn't even know this, right? What we were going by was Bridge Guy. The photo, the video that they had was so distorted and pixelated and messed up. There was no way. It looked like Ron Logan at that time. And even the body size didn't look like Ron Logan at that time. The gait don't look like Ron Logan. And, if Ron Logan had a part in it, then Ron Logan had a part in it. But we know this much. There's no way that old man got them girls to where they were and then did what he did. And then supposedly we have numerous volunteers that were out there saying that where them girls were found, we looked that night. Nobody was there. And then he brings the body back by himself, or, did he have help? There's no way he did all this himself. Now, from what we're hearing in this documentation and reading, he had the mindset of being a violent person. But there's a difference between violence, between a love gone bad, a heartbreak, and just two young girls walking on a bridge, and him go ballistic and kill them, and then leave the bodies on his property. Now, the new information that is coming out on Ron Logan is from Keegan Kline, who is saying, well, he knew Ron Logan, and Ron Logan was a pedo, and he kept it hidden or whatever. Well, I'm sure there would be evidence of that once they found out and went through Ron Logan's devices and everything. Did they find any sick and disgusting phones or devices of Ron Logan's that had kids on it? Did we find that out yet? Well, if they did, well, then Keegan Kline might be telling the truth. But until the police comes out and says, well, we found numerous devices at Ron Logan's and they had pedo photos on them, then bingo, was his name, all right? Then there might be a connection there. But even with the pedo connection, it's still kind of crazy being that Would he have killed him and left him on his own property, knowing they were definitely going to knock on his door? Why? Protocol. Even if Ron had nothing to do with it, it's protocol. You're not going to check the people's property whose property is this, right? And that's this guy. He lives over there. Well, let's go talk to him and see if he knows that there's 2 young girls on his property. I mean, I was just asking for trouble, right? Maybe Ron Logan got his coordinates wrong and thought he was off of his property and left it on the state property or the cemetery property. I don't know. But it's really fishy if you ask me. So do I think he was bridge guy? Not yet. And not until you give me a crystal clear photo of who it is. We've seen too many videos of creators' vision of bridge guy. And a lot of people went with that vision. It's very well possible that's why you got 7 sketches running around out there. And numerous people saying there was other people there. Numerous vehicles. But wasn't there a white pickup truck or something that they were looking for out there too? A white van or box truck or like a camping van? And everyone said everyone was nuts. There was nothing. That's all hearsay. Nothing. There was no vehicle, I don't know. Let's continue.
Interviewers that Logan had told her in the past he could kill her and no one would ever find her body. During her March 8th interview, Blank said she knew Logan carried a gun everywhere he went, and he would carry a gun in a fanny pack. She described it as one made out of nicer material. During her March 8th interview, she told law enforcement when she first saw the photograph of the man on the bridge,
Rebecca
she thought the
Ann,
police were
you're
looking
correct
for Logan
about that.
because she thought the photograph was Logan.
This is the
She did
stuff
not
we were
initially
allowed to
realize the
talk about.
photograph
This
was
is the
that of
stuff
the
we weren't allowed to
suspect.
hear.
A call placed using
RC
Logan's cell phone
99,
produced cell tower
right?
data
They
that
couldn't show
shows
their
his
hand
cell phone
or
appeared
what
to be
evidence they
in
had.
or around his property on the 13th at 2:09 p.m. Although his exact location cannot be confirmed, tower data shows his cell phone was in the Delphi area in the area of the Mononhai Bridge Trail. An analysis of cell phone data revealed a text message sent from his phone at 7:56 p.m. on the 13th. Initial exam of this analysis indicates his phone was likely outside the residence in the proximity of where Libby and Abby's bodies were located. Further analysis of the cell phone, he received a text at 10:16 p.m. on the 13th. This was likely outside of his residence in the same proximity of where Abby and Libby's bodies were located. He met with them on or about February 17th while they were on his property. He was physically able to get up and down the hill from his home. On the 14th, his former housemate was interviewed. The person resided with Logan from September 16th through December. They were in a sexual relationship on and off for approximately 3 years. During the interview, Blank said when she first learned that Abby and Libby were missing and found dead near Logan's home, she thought he was involved. She said in her interview that she feared him and even previously told her baby's dad if anything ever happened and she ended up dead, he did it. On March 14th, she explained in her interview that Logan had been violent with her in the past. She explained that on July 4th of 2016, while at his home, he punched her in the face, knocking her down. She said that she was drinking, but Logan was completely sober. She also explained that Logan was angry because she disrespected him in his home. On the 13th, Libby's family began searching the area of the trail where the girls were dropped off initially, shortly after 3 p.m. Libby's family and other community members joined the search thereafter. Carroll County Sheriff's Office was notified approximately 5:30 p.m. that Libby and Abby were missing.
Hello, Miss Debbie
Once
Fox.
the
Come on
search for
in
Libby
and
and Abby
relax.
began, no one reported seeing any person matching the description of the male on the bridge. The FBI established a database for collecting tips. A search of the database revealed 15 tips in which citizens both know.
Now, did I just hear her right? She said there was no witnesses that described a man that looked like Ron Logan. Don't you think the police would have showed Ron Logan's face? He was found uh, breaking his probation. The girls were found on his property. Don't you think that the police had enough common sense to take a photo of Ron Logan at that time and say, is this the guy you seen on the bridge? I mean, if that was the case, don't you think the case would have been solved a long time ago? Not unless there was other people involved. Thus far, it was an ongoing case. Did I say hello, Miss Debbie Fox? Come on in and enjoy your time and relax.
Known and anonymous attributed the crime to Logan for various reasons. Then came the most damning claim. In June of 2017, an inmate named Ricky Davis came forward with a chilling allegation. This information has come back into the headlines in 2025. According to Davis, Logan confessed the murders to him in disturbing detail. According to Davis, Logan allegedly said he lured the girls onto his property under the pretense of showing them his animals, but then things got out of hand. He said he slit Libby's throat with a box cutter, briefly took Abby with him, and then killed her as well. He said he burned his clothes and later returned to the crime scene that night. Details that may match evidence that had not yet been released to the public.
All right, I also want to say hello to Miss Rebecca Ann. Ma'am, come on in and relax. Now, this makes sense, right? If it was Ron Logan, he did it himself. He killed the one girl, left her there, took the other one with him to wherever. After it cooled down, he killed the other one and brought her back, or brought her back before he killed her and then killed her. Is that possible? Yes. Yes, it's possible. Excuse me. It's very possible. That would explain, well, he got rid of one because two would be harder to control. Maybe he wanted to do things, whatever. Maybe he was a sicko himself. See, we didn't know this information. Why? Because they kept it hid. So it's very possible he did this on his own, but others knew. It's very possible he had nothing to do with it, and he was just the scapegoat. Put him on his property, and he'll take the blame for it, right? Now, he was a violent man. Was he on meth? Was he part of the ring? The meth ring. He was a very violent man. He would flip out. Of course, his girlfriend was drinking alcohol and probably drunk and said something. And he hauled off and cracked her one, right? I don't know. If you live in that world where you beat women, then yeah, that's what happens. Some of us just, what do? You get your stuff, right? And get out. I'm not going to touch you. I'm not, just get out of here. Don't ever come back. Why didn't he do that? Who knows, right? Like I said, we didn't know this. What we said on this channel is Bridge Guy is not Ron Logan. If it is Ron Logan, then someone tampered with the footage. Or the killer already had the phone, just like what we're seeing in a lot of these cases now. They were in control way before anyone even knew it. He already had the phones, and he seen someone coming down the walkway, the bridge, and he took his opportunity and filmed them. Right, that's your killer. Well, people just didn't use an open mind in this case. They were all suspects until the case was closed. Let's continue.
The evidence against Logan didn't stop there. As we read in the search warrant, his own ex-girlfriend and cousin told law enforcement that they believe he resembled the man in the bridge photo. When his ex-girlfriend saw the image, she thought it was Logan himself. His cousin would share the same sentiment, telling investigators the man on the bridge looked just like his cousin Ron. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, Logan was never charged. Instead, he was arrested on unrelated probation violations and sent to jail. It was there in 2020 that he died behind bars. So was Ron Logan a killer who got away with murder? Or was he simply a man with terrible luck and even worse timing? Did his cell phone ping in and around his house or closer to the crime scene? I don't think those are things we'll ever know. The answer remains buried in the shadows of Delphi, alongside the voices of two young girls who never got to tell their story. Before we dive into the specific Odinism suspects, I need to take a quick step back and explain why this information is important. If you've been following the case closely, you know that the investigation into the Delphi murders has been full of twists and turns. One of the biggest revelations to come out was the Franks Memorandum, a legal filing from the defense that suggests law enforcement might have withheld key information. Now, normally I would stick just to the timeline, but the Franks memo and the Rushville investigation are critical because they show that law enforcement did look into some of these Odinism suspects early on. Before I introduce you to the Odinism suspects themselves, I want you to understand what was happening behind the scenes with this investigation. Because if the defense is right, the official case against Richard Allen may not be as straightforward as it seems. As the Delphi case was progressing, the defense uncovered evidence suggesting that law enforcement could have withheld key information, particularly those connected to Odinism. This information came to light through the Franks Memorandum, which the defense filed as part of a motion to request a Franks hearing. A Franks hearing is a legal process where the defense argues that law enforcement either intentionally misled the court or recklessly disregarded the truth when obtaining a search warrant. In this case, Richard Allen's attorneys claim that investigators ignored or even concealed evidence pointing to alternative suspects who practiced Odinism, a belief system that has been linked to ritualistic practices. So what the defense argued is that key members of the Delphi investigation, including Carroll County Sheriff Tony Liggett and ISP Sergeant Jerry Holman, actively downplayed or disregarded evidence against Odinistic involvement in the murders.
That was a key part, I believe. Hold on a minute. That was a key part, I believe. Has any information come out showing that Ron Logan was a Freemason or Odin? Because they're both the same. They're both connected, folks. They're both the same. Everyone. They're Odin. They're Freemasons. They just believe in the Odin thing or whatever. And I do believe that was a key thing. Why weren't these guys looking into certain stuff at that time? There were police that were, and that's what caused the war within the police department. Is some of these guys said this Odin crap is real. It's real. We're not going to deny it's real, but they weren't the ones that killed the girls, right? They are real. They do practice certain stuff. They are bad boys, but they weren't. That was another point that I threw out there. You're telling me these guys are Odin Freemasons? They're geniuses, self-proclaimed geniuses, and they left evidence and twigs and signs that are made to point directly to them. It was Odin's. Oh, are these dudes that dumb? But I guess some of them are. We're all dumb at some time.
One major point of contention is how investigators handled forensic analysis of symbols found at the crime scene. Initially, law enforcement claimed that a Purdue University professor had dismissed the idea that the sticks placed on Abby and Libby's bodies were connected to Odinism. However, depositions later revealed that this was misleading. The professor, Dr. Jeffrey Turco, actually believed the symbols were runic in nature and could indicate ritualistic elements. Furthermore, he had consulted with a Harvard colleague who agreed with his assessment. But despite this, investigators allegedly suppressed Turco's findings, with one officer claiming they couldn't locate the professor. But one day after the defense publicly revealed their findings in the
Now, why were the people misled about the Odins? Well, because some of us, if you stumbled up on two bodies and there was branches and leaves and everything all over the top of them, you would think someone tried to cover up two bodies, a murder. But then you got these professionals that are trained in certain stuff. They call them forensic evidence guys, which we didn't hear from them. And from what they say, we don't know if they were real forensic guys. I mean, top of the line forensic guys. So other people were saying, well, it was an attempt to cover up the bodies. Maybe they were going to come back and do something, move the bodies, whatever. Maybe they thought that these two girls wouldn't be missed right away. And they just made a fast attempt to cover up the bodies as much as they could until they came back and finished doing whatever they were going to do or move the bodies. So it is very fishy, right? Why didn't they look more into it? You had professionals saying, no, it had nothing to do with it. It looks like somebody made an attempt. Or what did the other people say? Well, it was they're Odin signs, but they're not done properly. So it looked like what? Someone was staging it to make it look like someone else or some other organization. Let's keep going.
Frank memo, law enforcement suddenly found Turco and conducted an interview. Okay, but why does any of this matter? The defense believes the suppression of evidence wasn't accidental. It was an effort to keep the case focused on Richard Allen while disregarding other viable suspects. Some of the men tied to Odinism had already been investigated and interviewed by the police early in the investigation. But it appears that these interviews weren't as thorough as the independent investigation being led by former Rushville Assistant Police Chief Todd Click. Click, along with officers Kevin Murphy and Greg Ferenczi, had been looking into possible links between an Odinist group in Rushville and Delphi since 2018. His investigation was separate from the official Delphi case, but the findings could have provided the alternative theory. Concerned that the primary investigation was being ignored, Click sent a letter to the Carroll County prosecutors in May of 2023, detailing his findings. But the defense claims that this letter, potentially containing exculpatory evidence, was not shared with them until much later. If the defense's claims are true, it raises major concerns about the integrity of the investigation into Richard Allen. It suggests that law enforcement had evidence of alternative suspects and potentially different motive, but chose to pursue Allen instead. So now that we've gone over why this information is important,
Interesting. That's very interesting, right? Now, it's very well that this came out and it was true that we live amongst witches. And these are bad people. And it very well could have been somebody that didn't like their organization or turned away from their organization, declined, or whatever it was. And it was a revenge kill, right? You people are witches, anyways. And boom, right? We don't know. Why? Because the devil is many. And in trying to keep track of all the madness in his head is unbelievable.
let's turn the focus to the alternative suspects themselves. Who were these men involved in Odinism? How are they connected to Delphi if they are? And why would law enforcement steer away from this specific theory? Some names in the Delphi case surface briefly, whispered through online forums and analyzed in sleuther discussions before fading into the background. But Brad Holder's name was not one of those. His connection to the victims, his online presence, and his shifting stories made him impossible to ignore. From the start, he wasn't just another tip.
Exactly, little lady. The things that he did and the photos that he posted is like another Greeno. He planted himself there. The things that he posted and said at that time after the murders on his social media or Facebook were just crazy. It was like, what the heck is he? What is going on here? So yeah, it's all starting to make sense, right? The perfect storm. Who was it? Your guess is as good as ours, but we know this much. There was many involved. If not the murders, the cover up of the murders. And the people involved is just as bad as sticking the knife in our backs and twisting it. Let's keep going.
His son Logan had ties to Abby. It is possible the two had even dated. When authorities seized Logan's phone at Logansport High School on February 14th, his mother did give consent. That same day, Logan and his father were informed that the girls had been found deceased. On February 16th, at 7:31 p.m., Brad Holder's name appeared in an official tip. But this wasn't just any tip, it was flagging his disturbing social media activity. His posts featured unsettling images of half-dead women, eerie Gothic artwork, and human-like figures made of twisted tree branches. There were rumors that the crime scene had been staged, so these images became impossible to ignore. Investigators moved quickly, the tip was marked as a lead, and an interview was scheduled for the next day. Brad Holder sat across from FBI Special Agent Adam Pohl and Hammond Police Sergeant Christopher Goatee inside the Delphi Police Department. He was questioned about his connection to Abby Williams and Liberty and his son's relationship with Abby, as well as his whereabouts on February 13th. Brad would tell investigators his son Logan had been friends with Abby and communicated with her online. He said he'd never met Abby himself. He worked a full shift at Waste Management in Buffalo, Indiana that day until somewhere between 2 and 4 p.m. And after work, he went to work out at the Workout Anytime gym in Logansport. He claimed he was nowhere near Delphi that entire day. But there were inconsistencies. During the interview, Holder revealed something else, something that set him apart from other tips that investigators were chasing down. Every weekend, he did spend time in Delphi staying with his Army friend, Patrick Westfall. That detail would become even more significant later on as the investigation would continue. On March 9th, a tip came in describing Holder as dark and scary. His social media was unsettling and full of this dark imagery. Despite this, lead investigator Tony Liggett reviewed the tip and determined there was no follow-up needed. On March 19th, a caller reported that Holder's voice bore a striking resemblance to the suspect heard in the infamous Bridge Guy recording. The FBI took note, but ultimately no further action was taken. On April 12th, a man in Georgia, Ryan Boucher, had been keeping tabs on Holder's online presence. What he found were photos. One was posed. It was two women as if they were dead, and their bodies were covered in tree branches. This imagery would eerily resemble elements of the Delphi crime scene. He first reported his concern.
All right, now a lot of you folks seen these photos of the bottom left corner, and everyone was saying them are the murder photos, but they weren't. That was from a totally different murder, had nothing to do with Delphi, and people probably got in trouble for showing them photos because they thought they were Delphi photos, but them are not the original photos. So, what are you dealing with here? Here is another guy that his actions after the murders placed him there or brought attention to himself. He was in the area. Patrick Westfall was a known guy down there. This is turning into a very, very devious, perfect storm. And if any of these guys were connected to any Freemason, any Odin association or lodge or anything like that, gentlemen, these boys are going to bring so much down on you. It's not funny, right? I don't find it funny at all. They brought attention to their own club, their own gang, their own association, which is bad for business. Once you find out that Odins and Freemasons are slaughtering little girls and doing sick stuff to them, it's over with. It's much like the Mephilia. Everyone, they're slaughtering kids and everything. I don't think so. Why? Bad business. No one's going to buy drugs from them. Right? Hey, Holmes, I got some stuff. Nope, sorry. You slaughtered two girls. We're not buying. We don't want our kids dead. Bad business. Bad business. Usually what happens to them guys is they do come up dead from their own club. Why? Bringing heat. Bringing heat when heat shouldn't have been brought down on them. Yeah, you got to have an open mind when you look at all this stuff. Let's continue.
Concerns to the Carroll County Sheriff Tobe Lesenby, who dismissed them. But undeterred, he went on and contacted Indiana State Police, where Trooper Winters received the report and shared it with ISP investigator Jerry Holman. Holman declined to pursue it further, stating that Holder had already been interviewed. On April 13th, Pulaski County Deputy Frederick Rogers attempted to verify Holder's alibi. His time card showed he clocked in at 4:55 a.m. and out at 2:45 p.m. at the Liberty landfill. HR confirmed that time card tampering was unlikely. And at first glance, his alibi seemed very solid, but security footage was never reviewed, and Holder's post-work activities were never verified. April 14th.
Now,
A
how do you
tipster
not check
reported
out
that
his
Holder
work
attended Libby
surveillance
and
cameras
Abby's
to
funeral.
see if he was actually
That in
there?
itself wasn't very strange, but what stood out is that Holder was wearing glasses, something he normally didn't do. And of course, that could have been nothing. But the bridge guy sketch was circulating around at the time, and some saw this as his attempt to subtly alter his appearance. August 14th. 2 women in a Facebook group made a claim. Brad Holder had murdered the girls as a pagan ritual sacrifice and left an F on their bodies. Indiana State Police Roland Purdy reviewed this tip, and his response was no further action required. In August of 2017, Holder was questioned again, this time at the Logansport Police Department, and the focus was his ties to Odinism and his connection to Patrick Westphal. But there was no formal report, no recording, and no documentation of this interview. Years later, defense attorneys reviewing the case file flagged this as a major gap in the investigation. By December of 2018, Detective Greg Ferenczi was not convinced by Holder's alibi. In an email to Detective Tony Liggett, he pointed out a series of red flags. Holder had gotten rid of his old phone, changed his phone number, and sold his vehicle. Individually, these actions might not mean much, but together, they painted a picture of someone trying to remove traces of their past, according to Ferenczi.
Boy, if you look at that photo, right there, Brad Holder, he ain't but a wee man. Huh? Don't he have a toe missing? Which would cause a gait in somebody with a big toe missing. I'm not sure if it was him or not that was missing a toe. But he ain't nothing but 5'4", 5'6", is he? Just a wee man. With a lot of big dudes around him. A lot of killers, trained killers, military guys, and very devious people. But you know what Mr. Obama and Trump and everyone said? You boys brought a B team to an A team, ass stomping. And that's pretty much what they're handing out across this YouTube street and Indiana. And, you know, and when they tried to blame other organizations and clubs that were from different cities and states, I was like, oh, this is going to get good. They might kill me, but they're going to tear the shit out of Indiana to get to these guys. Yeah. And they're doing a fine job of tearing the shit out of this case. Excuse my language, ladies. And getting to these dudes. Right? So let's continue to listen. Now, once again, I have no idea if Brad Holder is the killer. Brad Holder is in the predicament he's in. Why? Because he put himself there. That's why. If he would have kept his mouth shut and not posted shit deliberately to try and piss people off, deliberately he was putting a hat on, right? This is pissing you off, right? I look like the guy, don't I? It's just pissing you off. It's eating you up. I seen that video, people. I watched it. We watch everything around here. The ruins, taking photos of his tattoos and other stuff that was similar to it. Urging, taunting other states, other countries. Right? I was like, keep the cameras rolling. Let's continue.
August 30th, 2023. Holder was questioned one last time. His demeanor was very calm, and his answers seemed somewhat rehearsed. In 2017, he had told investigators he'd never met Abby Williams. But in 2023, he said he had met her, but just once. Now, this could just be a simple memory lapse, but I think he would have remembered better back then than he would have years later. The investigators had his phone directly in front of them, but they never asked at any time to extract any data, and that was another missed opportunity. Brad Holder's name didn't just surface once in this case.
That was another
It came up over and
crazy
over again.
question.
His social
He's
media
never met her,
contained imagery
but his
eerily similar
son,
to what was rumored about the crime
17-year-old
scene.
son,
Sticks arranged
dating
in symbols,
the girl.
bodies
She was
posed in
13.
unnatural ways, references to runes.
How do you not know?
Was this just a coincidence?
Girl that's dating your
Was he
son?
simply a man with a dark aesthetic who happened to be pulled into the Delphi case? Investigators were able to confirm Holder was at work during the estimated time Abby and Libby were killed. That fact placed him away from the scene, but did it exclude him from knowledge of what happened? His timeline was never fully verified beyond his work hours. His phone was never extracted, even when investigators had possession during later interviews. And when suspicion fell on him, his reaction wasn't to disappear quietly. Instead, he went online, making videos mocking those who believed he could be involved. And maybe that was just frustration.
Now that is true. And people can't figure out how he knew certain things. Well, because he wasn't under investigation. Nobody knew who Brad Holder was for many years in the Delphi case. His name was never brought up. He brought the heat upon himself. Why? Because he had, just like Keegan Kline, just like Chadwell and all the rest of them, they weren't behind bars. They had access to YouTube and social media. They knew exactly what was going on in the case. It wasn't years until after the murders or anyone mentioned Brad Holder or knew about him, a year after that or whatever, that's when he started putting these pictures up that everyone was going, oh my God, what is wrong with the dude? Is he the killer? He kind of looks like Bridge Guy. Well, sure, they all do. There was like 5 of them that looked like Bridge Guy. But here's the thing. They had witnesses that were there at the time. Don't you think the police have enough intelligence to pull up photos of these guys and show the witnesses? We're the witnesses. Now that the case has been opened, or the gag order, which I don't know, were they using witchery and sorcery to try and keep us quiet? I hope not. I hope not, because I got a pretty powerful laser and all the new weaponries that we got right now. Just ask Buffin, the kid from crossing the habitual line, right? Bunch of sickos and everything. But this is another one that put himself there, much like Anthony Greeno and other people. Why? Were they being paid to divert people away? Were they doing it just to piss people off? Ha, ha, ha. They already questioned us. They got nothing, no evidence on us. So we're going to act like total idiots and yada, yada, yada. And the heat came down. And the heat continues today. You have to ask yourselves that.
Anger at being dragged into a case like Delphi. Maybe he saw the investigation as incompetent and wanted to highlight its flaws. But Holder wasn't the only person connected to this case who raised questions. His friend, Patrick Westphal, was about to become another name investigators couldn't ignore. Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder weren't just connected by their time in the military. Their bond ran deeper, rooted in a shared belief system. They didn't just swap war stories over drinks. They followed the old gods, such as Odin, and they embraced the warrior's path, a way of life built on strength, honor, and tradition. In February of 2017, just days after the murders of Abby and Libby, that bond would be shattered. According to Amber Holder, Brad's ex-wife, something happened during a ritual near a river close to Westfall's home. The details were murky, intentionally so. Holder had been intoxicated and rattled, and he hinted at something dark and violent. He said the fallout was immediate and abrupt, permanent severing of their friendship. What could cause two men, bound by bloodshed and belief, to suddenly turn on each other? Amber would tell investigators that Holder pointed a finger at Westfall, claiming that he and his people were responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. Holder claimed that Westfall had a twisted ideology, one that justified violence if it meant preserving a perceived racial purity. He insinuated that one of the victims' families had mixed outside their race, and that was enough for Westfall to take action. Holder would warn Amber, quote, "I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions," end quote. Was this a drunken attempt to deflect blame, or had Holder revealed something he was never meant to say?
You're kidding me.
On February 19th of
These people were in
2017, 6
military,
days after the
so
murders,
you can't tell
investigators
me
knocked
this is-
on Patrick
this
Westfall's
is
door. His home sat 3.1 miles, just 7 minutes from the Monon High Bridge. Special Agent Adam Poe and Sergeant Christopher Goatee would sit across from Westfall inside his home. He did not appear nervous, and he did not hesitate. He fully cooperated. Westfall told investigators he was a priest of Asatru, a warrior-focused belief system rooted in Norse mythology. Every week, he hosted gatherings at his home, where a small group of followers would meet, sometimes in wooded areas, but mostly at his home, to honor their gods. When it came to his alibi, things became less clear. Westfall said that on the 13th, the day Abby and Libby were killed, he was at home with his son. But his son was never questioned. No neighbors were interviewed to confirm his presence. His alibi was simply accepted at face value. Investigators noted Westfall's association with the Vinlanders, a group known for its ties to white supremacy. His connection to Brad Holder was undeniable. But there was another name, Johnny Messer, a recruiter for the Odinite movement, linked to both Westfall and Holder.
And this is how
A network was
they
emerging,
started.
a group of
killing
men
people,
bound by ideology and
going crazy
circumstance,
to feeding.
all loosely circling around
Got it.
the Delphi
What was
murders.
named Johnny, or anyone they named in
Despite the
Frank
religious
or
overtones of the crime scene, runes, possible
they didn't even
staging,
know
symbolic positioning,
all along.
investigators
these
didn't deem it necessary to search Westfall's
disability
home.
people
A search warrant was
sitting in their
prepared,
apartment
citing that elements of the murder have potential religious significance,
had nothing to do
and
with it.
that Westfall was
That's
a
why
known member of a
Your
religious sect.
country is
But it was never
full of
executed.
crap.
A search warrant that was written but never served. In August of 2023, 6 years later, investigators circled back. Westfall was brought in for another interview, but this time something was different. He brought his phone with him. But when investigators ran a forensic analysis, they found no data prior to August 11th, 6 days before the interview. Coincidence? Did Westfall wipe his phone before stepping into the police station? Or had he replaced it before investigators had the chance to dig deeper? There's really no way to tell. He took a polygraph and he passed. He provided a DNA sample, even though he would brush it off, saying his DNA was already in the system because of his military service. In later interview, Westfall would lash out at investigators, calling them incompetent and criticizing the community for staying silent about Delphi's dark and dirty secrets. When asked about his old friend Johnny Messer, Westphal was quick to distance himself. He described Messer as an extremist, someone who practiced a darker version of Asatru, centered around the worship of Loki, which is the god of deception. Yet, despite condemning Messer's belief, Westphal did admit to practicing ritualistic animal sacrifice, describing how he
Loki.
had beheaded a chicken as part of his worship.
Loki.
Now, Patrick was never charged, never arrested,
Some
and the things that
spiritual
keep him in
witchcraft
the mind's
believing
eye of this story
madness.
is his home, just minutes from the crime scene. His alibi was never independently verified. His phone was either wiped clean or was brand new just before the police questioned him, and his name repeatedly surfaced alongside others who would be linked to the case. In two separate YouTube interviews, one in October of 2023 and another in June of 2024, both with Sleuth Intuition on YouTube, Patrick would break his silence. Over hours of conversation, he would address everything: his past, his beliefs, the accusations against him, and the investigation itself. Westphal's tone was defensive, at times frustrated, but unwavering. He dismissed much of what had been said about him as exaggerations, distortions, or outright fabrications. One of the key revelations from the interview was Westphal's version of his falling out with Brad Holder. Holder's ex-wife, Amber, had claimed the men had a violent confrontation during a ritual near a river, but Westphal painted a different picture. According to him, the break wasn't about a ritual at all. Instead, it was a conversation in his living room, and it was a disagreement over faith. Westphal claimed Holder had been attending Christian church services while also practicing Asatru with him, and when confronted about it, Holder chose to leave. No fight, no drama, just a decision to go their separate ways.
Miss Debbie
Yet,
Fox,
not long after that,
that
Holder
was
began
something you
telling
were
people
saying
to stay
earlier.
away from.
Right here, this guy is going to church. He's hiding in church because they know he's been made. He belongs to the Locky Box cult or whatever it is. Which these people are fit this description of everything there's showing: tattoos, yada yada, piercings, numerous of things, right? Which we had no idea about this stuff until some of these old timers started pointing certain things out to us, and these ex-military guys, right? You don't want to mess with that woman, right? Look at what's on her hand. Well, it's just a tattoo. No. She'll kill you quicker than a monkey's ass. What? That's what these professional guys now are coming to do is they're no longer these certain things. And am I discriminating against these people? No. We were raised that it was just body art. Nothing to it. Nothing to it. If it wasn't the number of the beast 666 tattooed on their body, it was just art. It was just art. And some of these people, that's what it is. It's just art. It's beautiful art. But you have to look at certain tattoos because there's a difference between art and a telling of a murder. Like some of these guys had it right on their bodies. So it wasn't hard to figure out that there was probably many involved. If not for them placing themselves there and then running to the churches for forgiveness. But yet, you heard it yourself from him. He was in church, Christian church, but he also at the same time was practicing witcheries and this stuff or whatever, idolizism or whatever they call it. So, Miss Debbie Fox, you were right about that. There you go. Right, these people do nothing but bad Monday through Friday and then go to church Sunday and ask for all forgiveness all as well. And they go back out and do the same thing, slaughtering and just matter. It's just unbelievable. So, yeah, there you go, Miss Debbie Fox. You were right about that. I agree with you. And I've said that numerous times on this channel. It's, You got to change. You got to break the chain there, right? You can't be sinning. I mean, who am I to even say you can't be sinning Monday through Friday or Saturday, just destroying our world, doing very sick and evil things to people. And then come Sunday, you go into church and it's forgiven. And then it starts all over again on Monday. What kind of madness have you people created? What have you folks done to thy God Almighty's name and his house? Did these churches know that these people were sinners and going to church, and the church was the front for them that, oh, well, I'm forgiven. I can go out and rape your daughters and hang them upside down and do all kinds of sick stuff and watch pedo films and photos and make money off of it. Most of these guys are in it for the money. That's it. For the money. They might be into the photos of their little selves, but most of these dudes, it's a business. It's a business. Let's continue. We might have to do a two-parter. This little lady, Miss Chasing, is a great creator, and this is a long video. I mean, it's interesting because all the things that she is saying right now is very possible. They might not have stuck the knife in, but they were the masterminds. It's possible, very possible.
From Westfall, even going as far as to imply he was responsible for the murders. And for Westfall, these accusations were shocking. He would say, quote, "I let that guy go in peace. And then I find out he was whispering in dark rooms about me like the walls were bugged," end quote. A controversial theory emerged in 2016 from a ceremony in Fort Wayne, which was videotaped by Brad. In the footage, you can see Westfall placing an object into a tree, something he would later explain as a coin or a crystal. While the act seemed insignificant at the time, it would later draw scrutiny in the Delphi case. Defense attorneys pointed to reports claiming that at the crime scene, the letter F was marked in blood on a tree. And if you go back a little while, remember the earlier rumor by the women that Brad had left an F on the girls. This led to speculation that Westfall's action in the 2016 video mirrored what was found at the scene, suggesting perhaps he was leaving a signature. However, it remained unclear which investigators initially identified this marking as an F or how it was linked to Westfall. Westfall scoffed at the theory, dismissing it outright. Quote, "They really throw the word evidence around pretty lightly, don't they?" End quote. To him, the idea that he would leave a signature at the crime scene was nothing more than a desperate attempt to connect dots that weren't there. One of the biggest red flags in the investigation came when Westfall was re-interviewed in August of 23. He had brought his phone with him, but when forensic examiners looked at it, all the data prior to August 11th was gone. Westfall never really offered an explanation. For investigators, this raised questions, but for Westfall, it was just an example of law enforcement grasping at straws. Quote, "They act like I erased some grand secret, like I had some kind of hidden knowledge. I was at home all day. My son was with me." What angered him the most wasn't the accusations from internet sleuths. It was how the defense team itself had portrayed him. Quote, "They painted me like some monster crouched in a corner, snarling, baring my fangs. I think they were getting ready to make me the patsy before they went after someone else." End quote. When asked who he thinks killed Abby and Libby, he didn't hesitate. Quote, "I think they are looking in the wrong place." End quote. He suggested that law enforcement should turn their focus inward, implying that someone within the system itself might be involved. He also entertained the theory that
agree
the
with
crime
that.
was drug-related, suggesting that
It could have
people had
been a
been so
disgruntled
fixated
person.
on the idea of a middle-aged white man that they might have ignored.
I can't judge these people. All I can do is report on it, which that's what I'm doing. I'm watching a video reviewing it of this woman's evidence or opinion. And it's a very good one, if you ask me. Opinion and video. The whole thing was just crazy. 8 years. 8 years. People getting attacked. People, and here's what I'm throwing up to Congress, Senate, Pentagon, White House, and all the YouTubers. If this stuff is real, then it's very well possible they did do the murders, but they put a spell or a curse or something. They were stabbing a doll, and at the same time, the girls were being killed by somebody that was being possessed or a spell on them. I mean, if you want me to get technical, we'll say it's real. All these people in prison are not to blame. And that's what we're dealing with as a country and as a government and as God's people. If we're to believe in this stuff, well, it's real. The Bible was real. These people are doing this. They are trespassing on us. They are cursing us. They are putting spells on us. Painful, very painful. But if you talk to the scientists and the doctors, you're going to end up like me, which I do have a problem, a mental problem. And medication will help you, but make sure your doctor knows what he's doing when you're on psychological medication. After so long, it could do more damage than anything. So, which way is it going to be? Now, a lot of people are probably going to unsub from me and say, "Well, you're talking crazy." Am I? Am I? These people are telling you, folks, in your face, they practice witchery and sorcery. They believe in things that are evil. Of only the strong survive, and the rest die. That's crazy. Ideology gone crazy. Century-old stories and ways people lived. It's 2025, and these humans still live like they're in the ADs and 1700s or whatever. Mind blowing. And people are like, well, how do you explain the pyramids? We built them. Wow, there's evidence of planes or flying saucers and engraved on the walls. Yes, that is true. It was us, right? And they were like, "You're crazy." No, I'm not crazy. See, we broke away from the slave owner, the driver, and we left the pyramids and created a society in advance as they stayed behind. And yes, we flew our planes over the pyramids and they were, oh my God, it's the sun gods. And no, we broke away from the Pharaoh and the slave drivers and created a new society and advanced and yada, yada, yada. Now, that's just my opinion. Do I know if that's true? Not 100%, but I can tell you this much. Every man, woman, no matter what color you were, was a slave on this earth. You could deal with it or not. Even us white people were slaves.
Other possibilities. Westphal did not pretend to be a saint during these interviews. He would say, quote, "I know I look scary. I know what my background looks like on paper. But people love guys like me when we're sent overseas to protect them. Then they don't know what to do with us when we come home." End quote. So he did acknowledge his past, his
Bingo.
affiliations, his rough demeanor,
Bingo. Let's
but he
play that
rejected
one more
outright that
time.
he
what
was
you
capable
said.
of something like the
Let's rewind that because this is part of our big problems.
my background looks like on paper. But people love guys like me when we're sent overseas to protect them. Then they don't know what to do with us when we come home. End quote. So he did acknowledge.
And there, ladies and gentlemen, lies the sleeping evil within. We love them because they go over and fight a war. And when they come home, they don't know what to do with them. What do you mean, sir? What do you mean? I don't understand that question. Because with my technology, I don't need you, humans, anymore. I can create a complete army of unmanned vehicles, which we should have did 50 years ago, but our government kept talking us out of it. Let's put it on the shelf. We don't need animals in our military. We need controlled adults that even though they go fight in a war, when they come home, they still belong to this country, society, and the mother green buck kicking machine. And they don't go out and rape, pillage, and become animals. So we got to create wars so we can send you animals to go get your frustrations out. And if you want the truth, it is true. We started a couple things that we shouldn't have. But you animals, well, you were on the loose. We had to get them out. Right? It's much like the lockdown of CV. Why did we lift it? Well, because the reports started coming in that the kids were being abused and killed, selling drugs and everything while they were at home on lockdown or whatever. So we had to lift it. They were getting abused more at home than they were on the streets. Yeah, that is my question to you people that so-called are professional. I'm the idiot. I'm the sick one. I'm the mental dude, the one in serious pain all the time, hiding it. Not even my pain sometimes. Sometimes I got these dudes all inside of me just tearing my guts out. But I keep believing in something good, God. So I don't know what these guys are talking about, right? What this guy just said about people love him because they need him for a war. Well, that's a bad way of thinking, right? And then we don't know what to do with you when you come home. Yeah, well, that's why we want to use our heads, and the humans are not made for this kind of stuff. So we create unmanned vehicles, unmanned planes, and now we've taken the equation of the madness out of it somewhat, right? I'm not sure, right? What should we all be doing? Well, we should all love each other. We're all created equal. And we're not racist. We love all kinds. And yet, there is bad in all kinds. This is horrible. This is why I want to leave. And I want to go back to, I hate to say it, what I used to be. wake up in the morning, have a great day, do whatever, work, do whatever, and whatever happens in the world or to anyone else in the world is not my problem. But then you become cold if you don't have a woman, someone to love, something to communicate with. You become a very cold person. Let's continue.
Acknowledge his past, his affiliations, his rough demeanor, but he rejected outright that he was capable of something like the Delphi murders. Still, he knew no matter what evidence cleared him, people won't stop looking at him. Quote, even if they catch the guy tomorrow and it's 100% airtight, I'm still going to be guilty in people's eyes. My name is stuck to this now forever. End quote. In the tangled web of suspects surrounding the Delphi murders, few stand out quite like Elvis Fields. His name surfaced early in the investigation, but it was his own words that made him impossible to ignore. A bloodstained jacket, a chilling confession, and an alibi that fell apart at every turn. Yet, despite those things, Elvis was never arrested. It started the morning after the murders, February 14th, 2017. Elvis came home jittery, nervous, and agitated. In his hands was a blue coat, stained with blood.
All right, this is supposed to be Elvis Fields or whatever. Which, when this first came out, this was years and years and years into the case. His name popped out, right? And I thought these people were joking. I went in a chat and they said, well, a new name release, Elvis. What? These people were going on and on about it, right? I became, it's Elvis. I'm like, I went, and pardon me, I forget what channel it was that I went in there and I commented, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it is not Elvis, right? He passed away. We all wish he was alive, but it's not him. Because we didn't see the dude's face. There was a sketch, but we didn't see a face. There was no name to the sketch, right? And a lot of people said Elvis Fields looks like Harmon. But more Harmon was real bad, right? They're like, is that him? What's going on? No, this is a totally different dude. Which he was suspect too in the case, right? Crazy. And how did all this happen? They put themselves into the case. Their actions, what they did on camera, what they did on Facebook, attacking YouTube channels, attacking my channel while I had music people in my chat. It had nothing to do with Delphi. And they were coming into my chat attacking me. And the people in my chat, which they got pissed off, right? These guys went nuts. All because we didn't buy their story. We didn't buy the whole Delphi thing yet. Why? Because we didn't have the evidence. It was still an ongoing case. And it seemed to me like these dudes were mad because they weren't number one or something, or people weren't buying their story and going to their channel for the information because they were claiming they were on the case the whole time. They were the number one reporter of Delphi, yada, 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 for years. And people were like, bull crap. We're not buying your story. And you folks didn't even know their background until recently. Some of these people should have never even, come on, you're going to cover the Delphi case, but you got a needle sticking out your arm as you're talking about the girls and you're on camera for the whole world to see, and you're supposed to be head guy. You got reporters calling you, wanting to talk to you because you said your dad was the killer, and yada 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 yada, and the guy's shooting junk, and you got the other one that's raping and pillaging women all over. And these are the top guys, and they're saying they're putting themselves there. They knew evidence before the evidence ever came out. How did Greeno and Harmon and the rest of these guys know about sticks, carvings, when no one even knew who this Elvis dude was, and no one knew nothing about sticks or anything? That's why everyone was shocked. Oh, what? Carvings in the bodies and letters and what? But yet none of that information was even released yet.
He handed it to his sister, Mary Jacobs, offering a rambling, disjointed explanation. "We're kind of in a gang," he muttered. Then came something even more chilling. He told Mary he had been on a bridge with 2 girls, and then he singled one of them out by name. "Abigail was a troublemaker. I had to give her horns." At first, Mary wasn't sure what to make of that. But as the news was breaking about the murders of Abby and Libby, a sickening realization set in. The details Elvis casually shared were too specific. Mary immediately reported what she heard to law enforcement. Law enforcement took the tip seriously enough to bring Elvis in for questioning. But when he sat down with detectives at the Rushville PD in 2018, he adamantly denied leaving town on the day of the murders. "I have proof of witnesses," he insisted. But when pressed for any actual proof, he couldn't provide a single name. At that moment, investigators had no evidence to hold him, so they let him leave. But just as he was being dropped off at home, Elvis suddenly turned back around and approached the trooper's car. And his next words would never be forgotten. "If my spit is found on one of the girls, but I can explain it away, would I still be in trouble?" The trooper, Kevin Murphy.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard that. Yeah. How did this get out of hand? I don't know. When you got idiots walking up to cops saying that, they spit on the girls. And if DNA shows up, are they, what do I think? I think they were all pedos. I think they all knew each other. They probably knew the Kleins. They knew the Sullivans. They knew all these dudes. A bunch of sickos. A bunch of sickos. A club, a gang that some of these guys on YouTube were talking about being initiated into or whatever, if that was even true, or if it was just a pedo ring. And they were just a bunch of sickos. I mean, you don't have to be, pedos are everywhere, even in Odin's, even in Freemason, even in biker gangs, clubs, everywhere. Citizens, just normal citizens. Yeah, you can't spot them, right? We wish we could, but we can't. We're working on it, though. Elon's working on it. Pretty soon we'll be able to hook you up to a brain computer and suck your brains out or something. I don't know. I'm just exaggerating. I'm shocked. If my family's seen this, they probably would, and they're military guys, they would be like, "This is not what our beloved military and serving our country is about, and it ain't like it used to be, Johnny." And back then, it was different, and you don't do stuff like that. It's bad, yada yada yada. These guys should be a disgrace. Their uniform should be taken off for even bringing this on, Mother Green and the butt kicking machine. That's how the old timers were, right? That they went to war, they came home, they took the uniform off, but they never dropped their oath, and they went through life working hard labor, learned a trade, and became something without slaughtering. Now, not all of them did that. Some of them did that, went to work, made an honest living. Some of them created their own militaries, organizations, and destroyed our country. Even though at once we did love them, they were military men and they saved our butts many a times. But in the same thing, God Almighty, all glory goes to God. It don't mean you have the right to come home and slaughter your own because you're having flashbacks of what you did in another country. And you might have been a rapist and a killer while you were in that country. You don't want me to break out the John Kerry tapes or when he went in front of Congress and Senate and explained of what very bad things some of our military soldiers had to watch other military soldiers do. But when you're in hell deep and need rice paddies and bullets flying all over the place, you overlook it. Well, this is what we got to deal with, the repercussions. Can we fix it? I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk to Elon, talk to some of these big guys or something. Maybe Dr. Phil can come in and talk to all these guys. I'm not sure. Let's keep going. It's not funny. I have to joke about it because, for one, I'm scared. I'm scared for our country. I'm scared for our children, grandchildren, children that ain't even mine. Grown adults I'm scared for. And really, you want to know the madness around us. Yeah, we all want to build walls, our own. And we all want to just let in the people we think we trust. But do you really know anybody? Not really. Hell, I live in a country right now. If they don't like you, they're going to make you out to look like an idiot, smell like an idiot. The new thing now, everybody's, pedophiles or whatever. No, not everybody. But when you got the record and you're friends with people and you're hanging around with them that are pedos, that's what made you a suspect. Nothing else. Don't get mad at anybody else, folks. These guys put themselves there and did stuff, even if they weren't perfectly innocent. Their intentions were to piss people off, to rub it in. And I find that horrifying, bad. Right? And then to come out and say these guys are military, they're Freemasons, and yeah, thanks for reminding us that my taxpayer money is going to these people's sickoism. Thank you.
Murphy immediately reported this up the chain. Yet, despite how suspicious that comment was, Unified Command never followed up. If what Elvis had told his sister Mary had raised eyebrows, what he later would tell his sister Joyce should have set off alarm bells. In October of 2017, months before his formal interview with the police, Elvis was living with Joyce after the death of her boyfriend. One evening, he made a confession. He would tell Joyce, "I'm in trouble and I'm going away for a long time." When Joyce asked him what he meant, he would say, "I was on that trail and that bridge with those girls when they were murdered. There were 2 other people there with me when it happened, and I spit on one of the girls after they were killed." At first, Joyce did not want to believe this. When police first questioned her about Elvis, she denied knowing anything incriminating at all. But by August of 2018, she changed her story and told law enforcement what Elvis had told her nearly a year prior. Now investigators had 2 different sisters coming forward, one reporting a bloody jacket and a statement, and the other recalling a direct confession. Investigators went on to try to verify where Elvis was on February 13th, but his story would crumble. Elvis, along with Rod Abrams and Ned Smith, claimed they had been in Muncie visiting a friend at the hospital. But when police checked phone records, hospital logs, and surveillance footage, they found no proof that any of them were there. And even more telling, Elvis's own phone. Records showed that his phone remained in Rushville for 9 hours straight that day with no activity at all. For a man who always carried his phone, this was highly unusual. Was it a coincidence? Had Elvis been told to leave his phone behind to prevent it from pinging? Investigators dug deeper. At this point, they seemed convinced.
And this is another thing I want to point out. There was enough time in the case that these guys knew exactly what was going on, and they all got together and planned a wild goose chase. Why? Well, because they could. Now, a lot of people are going to say, that's crazy. No, it ain't. Enough time went by. These guys knew the whole case. Some of these guys, I think Holder and the rest of them was flaunting it, right? They were watching it. They were pressuring. They were flaunting with disaster. What kind of idiot walks up to a cop and tells him he spit on the girls and would he go to jail if the DNA was found, and then tells his sister, not one, but both. Now, whether this guy had mental problems already and was a junkie, who knows? But what kind of person does that is my question, right? What kind of person does that? And now this all comes out. Well, his phone was shut. It was somewhere for 9 hours. Now, no activity at all. Leading up to the murders that day, the phone was just pinging, panging, poonging, poonging. But the day of the murders, mysteriously, no activity at all, zero. Right? Or whenever they're suspecting it. Well, it's possible. I don't know. It's probably not true. I don't know because I don't have the data in front of me. Looking at it saying that his phone, here's what his phone activity was before the murders. Here's the activity the day of the murders. And after the murders, here's his activity, right? The day of the murders, you got nothing. A flat line. Not used at all, right? Prior to that, the phone's going crazy. After that, the phone's going crazy. Is that suspicious? Well, maybe. But he might have been told to do that. Right? He might have been told to tell the police that stuff. He might have been told that by someone. Why? Because he don't look like he's all there in the first place. And they might have just been using him as a decoy. For all we know, he was a pedophile and knew Keegan Klein or these guys or whatever. Very possible. All right, we're almost done here, folks. This lady has really done her homework, and she must have been there from the beginning because a lot of this information you can't find today. You can't find some of this information, and this is all true. It happened just the way she's saying. It was just the perfect storm, folks. It was just the perfect storm. And how they get away with it, we're starting to believe this magic and witchery stuff that they use is how they've been getting away with it. And they've been watching our videos. They've been in our chats. They've been attacking people. They've been doing all kinds of stuff. And you know what's crazy is they might not have had anything to do with it. And they're just doing it to do it. They get off on it. I don't know how these guys can, and they do it because they're ex-military. You didn't serve for this country, your family, so you don't deserve nothing. Yeah, This is the ideology we live in today.
That Elvis wasn't telling the truth about his alibi or much of anything, and a search warrant was drafted for his home. Once the search warrant was drafted, detectives Greg Ferenczi and Kevin Murphy pushed for it to be executed, but Unified Command refused to sign off on it. Why? We don't know. While police continued digging into Elvis, another name kept coming up: Johnny Messer. Johnny was a recruiter for the Vinlanders, a white supremacist group. He had been involved with Brad Holder and perhaps Westfall, the other people that we've already discussed, and investigators wanted to know if maybe Elvis was connected to them as well. During his second police interview in June of 2018, Elvis flat out denied knowing Messer at all. But Messer would tell a different story. In October of 2018, he revealed that Elvis had actually lived with his uncle Billy. Not only that, but Elvis's father figure, Ned Smith, and Rod Abrams had all wanted to join the same club as Brad Holder. Was Elvis lying to the police?
All right, bingo. Another family with the name Smith. Last name Smith. Now, we knew there was a connection between Keegan Kline and the Smiths. And now there's a connection with the Smith family. Now, whether it's the same one or not, but they also want to become what Brad Holder is, right? They want to join his little thing. Let's continue.
To hide his connection to Holder, and if so, why? By October of 2018, police would sit down with Elvis for the third time, and here's where his alibi collapsed. His connection to other people we've discussed was undeniable. His own words were placing him at the crime scene, but he wasn't charged. So detectives made one last effort. They asked him to take a polygraph test, but Elvis refused. His attorney had advised him not to. Ned Smith, the same man who was sitting beside him during his interviews, was the same man who had paid for his legal defense, and the same man whose own alibi didn't hold up either. So, despite the multiple confessions, the failed alibi, deeply suspicious behavior, refusal to take a polygraph test, and having an attorney, Fields was never arrested. And his chilling words still echo in the case. I'm in trouble, and I'm going away for a long time. Was Elvis just a compulsive liar, feeding off the chaos and speculation surrounding Delphi? Or was he someone who knew more than he let on? His name lingers in the case, a haunting reminder of missed opportunities and unanswered questions. But Elvis wasn't the only one investigators were looking at. Another name would surface: Johnny Messer, the recruiter for the Vinlanders. He had ties to Brad, Patrick, and possibly Elvis. And just like others, his story was filled with contradictions, half-truths, and disturbing connections to the case. In the tangled web of figures surrounding the Delphi murders, another name would be mentioned often: Johnny Messer. He was a Vinlanders recruiter, a man with a violent past, and someone whose name surfaced again and again throughout the investigation. He had ties to white supremacist groups, Odinism, and criminal activity. Yet, despite multiple interviews, search warrants, and damning evidence, Johnny would never be charged. To understand his involvement, we have to go back before the Delphi murders. In 2016, Messer was working as a recruiter for the Vinlanders, the white supremacist organization with violent tendencies. His recruitment efforts were not subtle. He was actively pulling people into the group. even targeting men in his Rushville apartment complex. It wasn't just ideology, it was a network of individuals, some who would later be tied to the Delphi case and the investigation, among them Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, and Elvis Fields. Photographs from Vinlander gatherings show Messer, Holder, and Westphal together. This wasn't a casual friendship. These men operated in the same circles, shared the same beliefs, and now were being linked to suspicions in Delphi. On the day after the Delphi murders, Johnny Messer returned a borrowed car. His girlfriend at the time, Taylor, had loaned him her vehicle to visit his Vinlander buddies. When he came back, she immediately noticed something was wrong. There was dried blood smeared down the side of her vehicle. When she demanded an explanation, he had none. The blood was so embedded into the car's exterior, she had to take it to the car wash multiple times before it would come off. This was just one day after Abby and Libby's murder. Did the blood come from an animal? A fight? To Taylor, there was one logical conclusion. When investigators later questioned her, she stated, quote, "Messer and Holder are two of the most violent people I have ever met. They're fully capable of killing those girls." End quote. She also offered a possible motive: Messer's desire for status within the Vinlanders. She suggested the murders could have been part of an initiation ritual known as blood in, blood out, where an act of violence was required to gain full acceptance into the group. That was a major red flag, but months later, investigators would secure another piece of damning evidence. Taylor had been recording Johnny's phone calls, and what the investigators heard was disturbing. These recordings weren't idle threats. They were cold, calculated statements of intent. When police secured a search warrant for Taylor's phone, they found the recordings confirming Messer's violent nature and willingness to kill. Despite this, he was not charged. In 2 calls, he was offering money to have someone tracked down and harmed or killed. In another, he was bragging about holding a person hostage at his house and then shooting them. By October of 2018, law enforcement had enough concerns about him to bring him in for questioning. Detective Frenzy and Murphy conducted the interview. The first question was simple: "Have you ever been to Delphi?" Johnny's response was immediate and firm: "No." But that was a lie. Years later, in a 2024 deposition, he admitted that he and Brad Holder had been on the Monon High Bridge together before. The same bridge where Abby and Libby were last seen alive. The same bridge that had been known as a gathering spot for the Vinlanders and others in Messer's circle. But the contradictions didn't stop there. During the 2018 interview, Messer had tried to distance himself from Elvis Fields. But when pressed further, he admitted that Elvis lived with his uncle Billy. It was another lie exposed, another attempt to sever a connection that was becoming harder to ignore. January 30th of 2019, there was a search warrant for Messer's phone. This was more than a year after his first interview. Investigators were seeking history to his call history, his text messages, his photo gallery, any stored data that might link him somehow to the Delphi cases.
Enter Billy now.
I cannot locate any information on whether or not anything was found. There is no detail on this search. On February 7th of 2019, a second search warrant was issued for Messer's phone, and it was just a week later, but at that point, 2 years had passed. Had law enforcement simply waited too long? And again, there's no information on what that search yielded, if anything. Okay, at this point, we've spent about an hour unraveling some names and connections that never made it into trial. Ron Logan, the man whose property became the crime scene, a potential suspect from day one, dismissed by police despite suspicious activity and an unverified alibi. Elvis Fields, the man who confessed to his sisters, claiming to have been on the bridge with Abby and Libby, and whose own words placed him at the scene, yet no charges were filed. Brad Holder, the man whose social media mirrored eerie crime scene details, whose son was reportedly close to Abby, and whose name kept surfacing in whispers and tips. Patrick Westfall, the self-proclaimed Asatru priest, the man whose home was minutes from the Monenhigh Bridge, whose connection to Holder and Messer raised more questions than provided answers. Johnny Messer, the violent recruiter for the Vinlanders, the man who returned a car covered in blood the day after the murders, and the man who lied about being in Delphi until he admitted he had been there before with Brad Holder. These are not just theories. These are names that investigators did look into, gather evidence on, and ultimately dismissed. These are the names that Richard Allen's defense team was barred from mentioning in court. These are names that remain in the shadow of Delphi. But there is another name that looms just as large in this case: Keegan Kline, a known predator behind the Anthony Shots catfish account. The account that had been communicating with Libby just hours before her death. The man whose father, Jerry Kline, may have played an even darker role in the case. In the next episode, we're going to shift our focus to Keegan and his father, Jerry. Who was Keegan, and why was he never charged in connection with Delphi? What was the true purpose of the Anthony Shots catfish account? What do Keegan's own searches, alibis, and statements reveal about his potential involvement? And could his dad, Jerry, be a missing piece in the puzzle? We're going to look into the police transcripts, interrogation, and the digital trail that led to Keegan Kline's arrest, and why his name was kept out of the Delphi trial along with the others. The case has been decided. A jury heard the evidence, deliberated, and convicted Richard Allen. He has been sentenced, and now this case will move into appeals. But that doesn't mean the questions disappear.
All right, I can't watch no more of that video. That was one long video. It was a great video, but Miss Chasing, if you are watching, you forgot one suspect who fit the crime and was caught with a young child in his basement chained up, who did have connections to this club, gang, whatever you want to call it. And that man was Brian James Chadwell. I don't know if you know about him or not. Now, you folks have a great night. What a beautiful sunset. I want to thank everyone for stopping in. You're all great people. I hope I didn't wreck this video. I did put the description of the channel in my chat and in the description of this lady, Miss Chasing's video. You should check her channel out. It's a great channel, pretty peaceful. You folks have a great day. Once again, our condolences to all the families and the kids that were hurt or lost before the Delphi case, which Delphi now is being found to be connected to other things. Lock your doors at night. Keep an eye on your kids. God bless everyone. Have a good night.